So hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. So recently, one of my favorite YouTubers, Abigail Thorne, uploaded a video about the death penalty. And in that video, she referenced a very interesting case of Timothy Evans, which actually led to the abolition of death penalty in the UK. So I thought that this was, a pretty interesting case, and I wanted to look into this. So yeah, that's what this video is about. This video is about the tragic case of Timothy Evans. In 1950, a young Welshman named Timothy Evans was hanged for a horrific crime. The crime of murdering his wife and his 14-month-old daughter, Geraldine, in London. Timothy Evans was born in November of 1924. His childhood was a rough one. The thing is that he had a developmental condition. During his formative years, he had difficulty in crawling, walking, and particular difficulty in talking. He also had a deformed foot, which meant that he missed a great deal of schooling, and he barely learned to read and write. But despite that, he was able to move to London and find work as a painter and then as a van driver, even though he had particular difficulties in reading signs and maps. He was still able to manage that. In 1947, he met and married Beryl Thornley, and the couple initially lived with his mother in Notting Hill. When Beryl became pregnant with their daughter, Geraldine, the couple decided to move into a small flat a short walk away from where they lived. In 1949, Beryl fell pregnant again, but this time, they decided to terminate the pregnancy. And keep in mind that abortions were illegal at the time. Evans was actually initially against it, but after discussing it with Beryl about the financial situation, he hesitantly agreed. Evans talked about his difficult situation with his neighbor at the time, named John Christie, and John persuaded Evans that he could conduct such operations as he had had some experience with it because of the police work that he did years earlier, and that he had some medical knowledge and was able to perform the abortion. When Evans returned home later that day, Christie told him that his wife died during the procedure, something all too frequent during these unregulated terminations. He then told Evans that he would dispose of the body and find someone to look after the baby Geraldine, and told Evans to leave London for a while, as the police would be looking for him. So he did as Christie told him. But then he did something remarkable. He walked into the local police station in Merthyr and told the police that he was concerned about the safety of his daughter Geraldine. When asked about the whereabouts of the child's mother, Timothy said that she died in unusual circumstances, and upon further questioning, he said that he had given his wife a liquid a man had given him in order to abort the baby, and she died. So essentially, he confessed to killing his wife. That's what essentially happened. He told the police officers that after she died, he put down his wife's body down the drain outside his London home. Police in London were notified, and they checked the drain at Evans' home, but they found nothing. And realistically speaking, lifting the drain cover would have been impossible for one man. Now, this is something interesting that I found out, okay? Later on, the police did a second search, which we're gonna talk about, and that time, the police officers found a human thigh bone being used to hold up the fence. They found out that later on. They didn't find it during the first search, so it should tell you how thoroughly they investigated the situation, that they did not fucking notice that there was a human thigh bone being used to prop up a fucking fence. Anyways, let's continue the story. So after the police did the search, and told Evans that no, there was no body down the drain. You basically lied to us. Evans then later withdrew his confession and said that he made his original statement in order to protect his fellow tenant, John Christie, who had performed a termination on his wife. And he wanted to protect Christie because abortions were at the time illegal, so he didn't want Christie to get into trouble. And this time, he told the officers the whole truth. He told the officers that he and Beryl wanted an abortion and that Evans said that he could perform the abortion. And when Christie returned that day, Christie told him that his wife died during the procedure. And he also told the police officers that Christie told him to leave London and that he'll find someone to take care of baby Geraldine. But Christie, in his heart, didn't felt right, so he came back to London. But when he returned back, Christie didn't allow him to see his daughter. John Christie simply didn't let Evans see his child or give details about her whereabouts. And that's why Evans was concerned about Geraldine's safety, and that's why he called the police. So Christie was called in for an interview. John Christie was a mild-mannered man, and he was also a former police officer. And when called into questioning, he told the police all about the clashes between Timothy and his wife. He told the police all about how Timothy and his wife would argue on and on about silly things like Beryl not cleaning the house properly. And he also told the police that Timothy had an alcohol problem and Beryl didn't like that. Beryl was usually upset that he spent the little money that he made on alcohol. So he told the police all about these arguments that he heard as their neighbor. Finally, the police went in for a second search and they searched a locked wash house and they found something. They found not just Timothy's wife, but they also found 14-month-old baby Geraldine and a 16-week fetus. Autopsy concluded that Beryl died by strangulation, and facial bruises also proved that Beryl was assaulted before her death. At this point, Evans was still being held at the police station, and he was told that the bodies were found and that they died by strangulation. Police asked Evans whether he was responsible for their deaths, and Evans confessed that he did murdered Beryl and baby Geraldine. In his confession, he told that one day they were fighting about money and things got out of control, and he ended up strangling Beryl and hid the body in the wash house. He also killed baby Geraldine later. But this confession in later years has come under massive scrutiny. Many people say that Evans couldn't make such a coherent statement. This confession was 1,952 words long, and this is not something that Evans, an illiterate person, would be able to write on his own. And like I've said, Timothy had a developmental condition. He was later assessed to have an IQ of a 12-year-old. How can someone who has an IQ of a 12-year-old write such a coherent statement? It makes no sense. And during the trial in court, he said that he feared being subjected to violence by the police. That's why he wrote the confession. So this confession is under massive scrutiny. Just just to be clear. So, in January 1950, a trial was held, and about just 40 minutes of deliberations by the jury, Evans was convicted of murdering his daughter. And by the way, the main prosecution witness in the trial happened to be a very mild-mannered man named John Christie. Now, this is very strange to me. This fact is very strange to me. Christie's testimony was so easily considered reliable. How is that possible? Because it's not like he had a clean slate. No, he himself had had trouble with the law, and he himself had assaulted a woman. How was his confession taken seriously? I don't know. But anyways, after a trial lasting just 3 days, Timothy Evans was convicted and executed. His trial was on 11th January 1950 and he was executed on 9th March. Now, looking at the situation from the police officer's point of view, it's really hard to argue here about their lazy investigation. I mean, it's strange now that I say it out loud, but think about it. Really think about it. There's a guy that comes to you and says that, oh, he's concerned about his daughter, and he tells you that, oh, he gave his wife some liquid that apparently killed her, that was supposed to abort the baby, but it killed her. And then, instead of, I don't know, going to the hospital or something, he decides to put the body down a drain. And then you go and search in the drain, and then there is no body. This sounds crazy. And it does seem sort of obvious who's the killer here, right? It does seem like Timothy is the killer here. So it's really hard to argue against the methods that the police used, you know. And also, you have a reliable witness, right? Christie, who used to live there, who told you about the clashes between these two. It's obvious who the killer is. And if Timothy is not gonna confess to his crimes, well, we can make him confess to his crimes, if you know what I mean. And really, are we doing anything wrong by making him confess? Not really, right? Because he is the killer after all. Who else could it be? Does that make sense? It's the reasoning of the police officers is logical. But of course, the problem is that Timothy was innocent after all, and he was executed. This is why you don't just kill people when they are found guilty. This is why places where the death penalty still exists, this is why the appeal process is so long. This is why it takes so long. Because if you're arrested and you didn't commit the crime, well, you can be set free. You can be given some compensation or something. But if you're executed and you're found not guilty, it's really hard to bring back the dead. Really hard. It's not that easy. But of course, I'm talking about the death penalty from a more modern point of view. At the time, there was widespread support of the death penalty, and it's really hard to argue against it. Like, for instance, a rapist, yeah, they deserve to die. Child fuckers, yeah, they deserve to die. Let them die, sure. It's really hard to argue against the death penalty. But anyways, at the time, there was very widespread support for the death penalty. But as I've already spoiled the main part, 3 years later, a terrible truth emerged. After John Christie moved out of his ground floor flat, the bodies of 3 women were found by another tenant hidden in papered-over recess in the kitchen. A further search of the house uncovered 3 more bodies, one of which was Christie's wife, which was buried under the floorboards in the front room. And another one was a former colleague of Christie, who was in shallow graves in the house in the back garden. All have been strangled and wrapped up, just like Beryl and baby Geraldine. John Christie had even used one of the women's thigh bones to prop up a fence in the garden, something that should have been fucking noticed by the police during the first search. Goddamn. Evans was tracked down and he was arrested in London in March of 1953. And during his questioning, he did confess to killing Beryl Evans, though he never admitted to killing baby Geraldine. Christie was put on trial and found guilty of murdering his wife, and his defense of insanity was rejected. He was hanged in July of 1953 by the same man who hanged Evans. Wow. Just wow. What a fucking story. Now, you might have a question of why the hell did Evans told police the lie in the first place? Why did he try to protect John Christie? And like I've said, the answer is that he had a developmental condition. Like he had a particularly hard childhood, he had trouble talking, crawling, walking, and later on he was assessed to have an IQ of a 12-year-old. You know, if you say to a 12-year-old, hey, do this or else you'll get in trouble, that 12-year-old will do that, you know? So, you know, it made sense from Evans' point of view. And the fact that abortions were illegal at the time also had a factor. That's why he didn't want to tell police the truth. And you and I can understand that, you know, you should never lie to authorities. But really, can you expect that level of maturity from someone who has an IQ of a 12-year-old? I can't, you know? So it does sort of make sense. His lying does sort of make sense. Now, the last mind-boggling fact about this case is that Evans' name was eventually cleared. Eventually. And by eventually, I mean in 2004. The government officially cleared Evans' name in 2004. And the murder took place in 1949. At this rate, only in 2100 we'll find out that Epstein didn't actually kill himself. Jesus Christ. Anyways, so that's all that I have for this video. Like this video if you liked it. Comment your thoughts down below about what you think. Subscribe for more videos. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.